sometimes we learn how to shrink so that we don't send any ripples out into the world. And I want to encourage you to stand in your sovereignty, to release the idea that you have to play small or you have to shrink. Because really, you're here to bring your beautiful light to the world, whatever that looks like and however you want to do it. That part is up to you, and it's fun. It's fun to do all kinds of different things. Navigating friendships when your brain works differently than other people. Hi, friends. It's Dianne here. It's Someone Gets Me. And today we are going to talk about friendships, relationships, getting into conversations and engaging with other people. This is a very tricky topic for most people who are gifted because connection and relationships can be so very difficult and challenging. And a lot of us have different kinds of challenges in different ways. So I'm going to cover some ideas here, knowing that this is not all inclusive and that everyone has their own way of being. But there are some overarching themes I think that are important. Now, if you're not neurodivergent and you're listening to this show or you see the show pop up, please make sure you share it with somebody who is neurodivergent and listen to it for yourself. Because understanding your friends, your family, and the people around you is so important. And today in our world where there's so much divisiveness, this level of understanding can transform our friendships, our family, and our relationship with ourselves. Because things are different when you're neurodivergent. So one of the first things I want to talk about is the word friend and friendship. Just because somebody is friendly doesn't mean they're your friend, right? And so I work with a lot of the people that work in companies and corporate settings, and they're leaders and sometimes not necessarily a supervisor. But when somebody is friendly with them, they assume friendship. That's a big neurodivergent error sometimes, because we can be friendly without being friends. And so it comes back to, how do we define the word friend? Like, a friend is not an acquaintance. So what is a friend? For me, I can tell if somebody is my friend because there's investment in the interactions both ways. Or I'm invested in the other person in supporting or helping or listening or whatever it is. And the other person also invests energy and time into me, whether it's shopping or listening or sharing a good meal or just being there. And so real friends actually have a reciprocity, an exchange of energy, of support, of connection. And there is investment in that relationship. Now that's Diane's definition, right? That there is that investment. And not everyone sees it that way. But I think it's important to understand that, especially as a neurodivergent person, that there are times where we are going to jump into something, and because somebody's nice to us or friendly, or we're yearning so much for connection that we miss the cues that there might be an undisclosed motive or the person doesn't really want to be friends. So gifted and neurodivergent people really have to learn how to connect on different ways so that the word friend and the meaning of friendship really takes root in who we are. So sometimes we have to redefine what it even means to be a friend. Sometimes we have to understand that there's depth and authenticity and different intellectual things that excite us and resonance on other aesthetic ways that matter to gifted people. And everyone who's gifted and neurodivergent might do it a little bit differently. We also want to pay attention to our asynchronous needs, because people who are neurodivergent and gifted don't always connect in the same way. I have a client who he has so much trouble with small talk in the medical world he lives in. He has a very specific, technologically advanced job in the medical world. And so a lot of people where he works makes fun of him or has difficulty connecting with them. He's even been reported for being antisocial. Well, the truth is he's focusing on the treatment and the care that he's giving the patients. The truth is his neurodivergence makes it so that it's difficult to relate in topics that he seems to think are unimportant to him. They might be important to the people, like what the soap opera was the conversation that I had to help intervene with. He doesn't care about that. And it's not that he doesn't like the people, and it's not that he's antisocial. It's that he's there doing a very specific job and he's taking it very seriously. So neurodivergent people integrate and take things differently than a lot of other people. So we want to learn about these things. We want to invest in our friends and our friendships and understand how each one of us does it, because we all do friend differently. Now, there's that whole idea that you hear about, you're too intense or you're too much. I mean, I was told from the time I was little that my bladder was too close to my eyes because I'm so emotional. And I've had some friends tell me I was too emotional. And those friendships have kind of waned a little bit. They're not nearly as close anymore because the people have a hard time with my emotions. And I've had people in my life that were so stoic and difficulty with their emotions that we're still friends and friendly, but it's not as close as maybe it could have been or once was, only because our brains operate differently. When our brains operate differently, then we have a different life experience. So part of being a friend when you're neurodivergent, or if you're making friends with a neurodivergent person, is to understand what the meaning of friend is and how you and that other person actually live out that definition. For me, I look at investment. How much am I investing? What am I putting into the situation? And then what is that other person investing and what are they putting into the situation? And of course, it varies as time goes on. So it's not like all giving and all taking, certainly. And it's not necessarily 50-50. It is, does it feel comfortable? Is there a flow? The second thing I want to talk about here is what I would call the economics of our energy and economics of our connection, meaning that every relationship takes different levels of energy. I have some friends that I don't have to talk to them for a long time and we pick up right where we left off, and there's a flow in the energy, and there is a great economy. Things work smoothly, things work well. We handle our situation and our lives beautifully. And there's other ones where the energy economics tends to take a little bit more out of me, and I'm spending a little bit more in order to maybe keep the conversation or the relationship alive. And sometimes when we're connected, you probably all have people like this too, where you're connected to them and you're having a conversation and it feels like it's hard sometimes. And sometimes it is hard because we have sensory issues, we have emotional and mental health type of issues, but we also have just processing issues that are different than a lot of people. And sometimes it's vocabulary. Oh my gosh, I have some friends and that have a different vocabulary than me. And it's hard sometimes because we're kind of always defining or explaining what we're trying to talk about. And we are very close to each other and we're good friends. And it takes a little bit more energy. It's not as economical to get into a scholastic kind of meaningful conversation because we use different language to mean different things. And so we have to do a lot of defining. It takes a lot of effort to do that. You also want to pay attention with this energy economics to your battery. I always say I got to charge my batteries, my inner batteries. And so for some of us, being in a social setting or a big event for a long period of time drains us. Some people are more drained being by themselves. Sometimes we get in a conversation that is enlivening and we get charged up, and now we have more energy after than when we went into the conversation. And the opposite can also be true, where we're in a conversation and it feels so heavy that when we're done with the conversation, we can feel heavy or spent, tired, if you will. And so we want to pay attention to where's our battery level. Like right now, my battery's pretty charged up. I was just interviewed on an amazing podcast about neurodiversity. I've talked to some people today. I've worked with some people. I've created some things. And now I'm here talking to you about the thing that brings me such great joy. And that is our neurodivergence, our giftedness, the fact that we, as a collective group of people, are here with a mighty purpose, and how exciting that is. And so for my energy, my batteries charge right on up because of that. And sometimes though, it can kind of get a little tired and I'm like, "Whoa, baby, let's get through the day." And there's no wrong answer. There's nothing bad about any of it. It's just pay attention. Now I want to shift my attention a little bit here to the meaning of words. I kind of mentioned it a minute ago, but what really matters, I think, is that we understand the meaning of the words we use. Now, when I was very young, my mother used to always say to never use a word you don't know the meaning of. In fact, one of the first books I ever read, if you will, it was a dictionary. I really love words. I know it now. I got it from my mother and my maternal grandmother, who was also an author. And I love the meaning of words, and I love the varied meanings of words and different spellings and things. So I love vocabulary. And not everybody uses the same word to mean the same thing. And so when you're gifted, it's easy to use a word that somebody else may or may not know the definition of, or to use a definition different than the common definition. And so that can sometimes lead to misunderstandings. It can sometimes lead to somebody nodding their head and not understanding the meaning of what you're trying to say. It can also lead to what I would call like a static interference in a friendship or a relationship, because I'm speaking with one language set and the other person is expressing themselves with a different language set, and they may not exactly mesh. And so sometimes it behooves us to really listen to the other person and listen to ourselves so we can begin to get on the same page, literally, to understand that sometimes when we have awkward communication or things feel off, it's because two very smart people trying to engage can be using different nuance, different language, different ways of approaching a situation. So our skill set and our hyper awareness and all of these things that we have can sometimes work against us, because we're going to nitpick maybe, or maybe we're going to not understand that it's important to translate what we're saying, and not in a demeaning way, but in a way to make sure that we're heard in a way that matters to us. So I'm often saying, are you sure you know what I mean? Or I'm asking people what they mean by a certain word, because the chances are pretty high that their definition and my definition might be a little different. It could be really different, but they're at least a little different. And I want to understand what the person's saying. Again, that goes back to investing. If I'm invested in my relationship with you, I'm going to ask you the meaning of things or what you mean by something, so that, first of all, there's less miscommunication, but also so I can be connected to you and we can be on the same page. That's called investment in the relationship. Asking the questions and listening with attention and intention, and being sure that to the best of our ability, we're on the same page. And that takes effort. It takes investment on both people's parts. Now, it also gets tricky when there's a challenge in the relationship, right? Where we have a disagreement, maybe, or a miscommunication. Sometimes a miscommunication involves not getting a return phone call, or texting somebody and they don't respond, or somebody says I'll call you later, and for them it means I'll call you later in our lifetime, where that person might think that they're going to call later today. I used to think that when somebody said I'd call you later, I thought it meant later that day. And then I realized I ran into all these people who later meant sometime in the future. So does later mean that day or that week or what? So we want to make sure that we don't end up having rejection sensitivity and feeling like we're being ignored or dissed or rejected by people who care about us because we use the words differently. So sometimes when somebody says, they'll call later, for using that example, I say, okay. And then I might ask a clarifying question. Later when? Are we talking today or later? Like, and then they usually laugh at me. I'm like, well, I just want to know if I'm to watch my phone today or if it's going to be some other day. I don't really care when. I just want to know which it is. And most people understand that. But understand that we as humans often make all of these judgments and assumptions about what we think other people mean and what we think the other person's agenda is. And sometimes we don't even know what our own agenda is. And sometimes we don't even know the meaning of our own words. Many times I have asked people when they use a word I don't know, and I say, whatever that word is, what does it mean? And they can't tell me what it means. Now, they think they know what it means, or maybe they've heard it somewhere and they're repeating it in the same context. But that doesn't mean that's the meaning that they're using. So do you see that having friendships, when your brain works differently, takes a little bit more investment, takes a little bit more understanding, takes a little bit more attention and intention to the nuance of the relationship and the communication and the energy. I think the economics of our own energy usage and the value that we put on our friendships is so vitally important. And the last thing I want to mention that has to do with friendships in this space, it has to do with cultivating kindred connections. It has to do with understanding that having multiple peer groups and many different types of people in our world, cultivating those relationships, those friendships, help us alleviate existential loneliness, grief, feeling sad, maybe even anhedonia, because we as humans are meant to be connected to others of the same species. And so if we're not feeling connected or we're keeping people at a distance, what's happening is we are creating a wall that we think might be there to protect us, but it is also there and it isolates us. And so we don't want to be lonely. And the antidote to that level of loneliness is to learn how to connect, to have a resonant conversation where there's reciprocity and the energy economics flow back and forth nicely. And that's important. It's important to know that there are people who you can do that with. And we want to pay attention to choosing and the people who are the right ones for us. And the way we do that first is take care of ourselves. We become the right person to be friends with because we listen and we pay attention and we're invested in the people we say we're invested in. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to invest heavily in every relationship or friendship we run into. You're going to invest differently based on the relationship. You might be friends in school or friends with coworkers, and really it's more friendly, right? Where maybe there's a common goal of getting a group project done or getting the job done. And so we engage and we're friendly and we do the work because that's what we're all there to do. But would you connect with that person and go out for a meal or go to a movie or go on a trip with them or spend any social time with them? If the answer is no, of course not, then that's a friendly coworker or co-student relationship. If we're friends, the answer would be, of course, I would invest time with that person. And there's no wrong thing here. It's we want to have clarity. We want to have understanding that if we're going to build friendships as a neurodivergent person, we don't want to misread it. We don't want to be thinking somebody is a friend and investing in us when they're not, because they won't be investing, they won't be meeting our need, and then therefore we will start feeling rejected. And then once we start feeling rejected, that can cascade into all kinds of things when really it's not about rejection at all. It's about misreading the definition of friendship for you and or the other person. So we want to have clarity of those things, pay attention to those things. We also want to know that you, as a neurodivergent person, will often, when you set out on a personal growth and development journey, like all the people I work with are, you outgrow people. I help people get sober in 12-step programs, and some of my people outgrow their sponsors and outgrow some of their initial support circle. Not because anybody's better or worse, but because that's what gifted people do. Neurodivergent people will tend to outgrow others around them. That's totally fine, but be aware of it. I have somebody I'm working with now that he's outgrowing some of his previous support system. And nobody's done anything wrong. He's just growing fast. And so he's learning that when we grow and a relationship or a friendship that once was harmonious and beautiful and we were connected now seems misaligned and kind of off, right? That it's time to release that relationship and that friendship so that we can keep moving and that other person can keep moving toward their goals, toward their life happiness. And so that level of change is deep, and sometimes there's grief with it, and sometimes there's relief with it. There's all kinds of things. But what matters is that we want to be curious about things. We want to have the space to say, how is this relationship serving me? Sometimes people stay in relationships that aren't really healthy because there's a secondary gain. There's just something serving them there. Sometimes people don't even know how a relationship is serving them, but they stay anyway. So I think when we want to find the right people and we want to be connected to like-minded people or kindred spirits, then it matters that we are connected to ourselves so that we draw in and we can reflect back and forth with people who are similar to us. And then we also can do a similar reflection with people who might be a little different from us. See, it's all this beautiful exchange of energy. It's all this beautiful exchange. So friendships to me are kind of like floating down or tubing down a river where sometimes it's bumpy because there's rocks and the water's moving faster. And other times it's slow and easy. And at the same time, both people are engaged and invested in what's happening, invested in the welfare of each other, really. And these things, I think, are really important. I think that being able to navigate our friendships as a neurodivergent person and being able to realize that we connect differently. Every one of us connects differently with different people. No two of us do it the same. Now, there's similarities, of course, but no two of us do it the same. So think about your friendships right now. Just, if you're not driving or whatever, maybe close your eyes or gaze off and just think about the people you call friend. And then ask yourself, am I invested in my relationship with this person? And not out of neediness or clinginess, but am I invested? And then ask yourself, is that other person invested in their relationship and friendship with me? And if it's not yes across the board, then it might take a little evaluation. It doesn't mean you drop them like a hotcake, right? It doesn't mean you throw them out. What it does mean is that you evaluate the relationship. You might be withholding and not investing with relationships because you've had your feelings hurt previously and you don't want to get hurt again. So you're being a little bit withdrawn. Or you might be withholding because you're not really sure how to invest. So there's all kinds of ways to approach this to understand that navigating your friendships when your brain processes differently takes a little bit more attention, a little bit more intention, and a little bit more focus on the economics of your energy transfer, on the economics of how your mind, your heart, and your spirit operate together, or how they're aligned or not. And so it's exciting for me to see people who are different and neurodivergent and different by design come together and meet all kinds of people and make friends and be friendly with and engage in different ways with others, some as equally gifted and some differently gifted, but all beautiful people nonetheless. So that is what I have to say right now. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be more coming up about friendships and navigating them. Be careful not to let miscommunication or a misunderstanding put a rift in a friendship. If you think somebody means something, then, and you're not sure, ask them what they mean, right? Make sure that there's clear communication and you're using the same definitions of the same words. Remember that if you're feeling a little awkward in some situations, that really what you're trying to do is be authentic, and that's a good thing. Sometimes we learn how to shrink so that we don't send any ripples out into the world. And I want to encourage you to stand in your sovereignty, to release the idea that you have to play small or you have to shrink. Because really, you're here to bring your beautiful light to the world, whatever that looks like and however you want to do it. That part is up to you, and it's fun. It's fun to do all kinds of different things. So I want to leave you with a little story about this person. She was pretty amazing, and I met her a long time ago, probably around 10 years ago, I guess now. And we hit it off right away. We were in a business event that was kind of networking and kind of an education thing. And it was really fun. And we really hit it up. It was like we were best friends right away. And then what happened over time was that she would invest some in the relationship and then I would invest some in the relationship. And it seemed pretty balanced. And I could see that she was neurodivergent, but she couldn't really identify it. She didn't really know she was, but she was. And so she had difficulty with some of her conversations and some of building rapport and communicating sometimes because she didn't know how to work with her neurodivergent brain because she just thought she was like she was. But I could see that. And so I had a little bit more awareness of it. And I would still invest in the relationship, and so would she. And many years have passed and we're still friends. But the difference that we've had over the years is that Now, because she is developing and growing personally and learning things, her understanding of her giftedness and neurodivergence has changed dramatically. Because it's changed dramatically, she's able then to have more quality relationships with her family, with her friends, with herself. And that all comes because she made the decision to be open minded and grow and change and evolve. It all comes because at some point, we all decide that we're going to quit fighting and we're going to be who we're authentically meant to be. And she started doing that. And every once in a while, she'll call me and tease me about how I always ask the hard questions and it was really difficult for her. But she was willing to look deeper into herself and see the beauty that she's bringing in the world. And today we get to totally support each other in all kinds of amazing, great ways. And the most important thing of all is that she's authentic and I am authentic. And we can be colleagues, we can be friends, and we can also go off and goof off together. All of those things happen because we have invested in different levels over a period of time. So it's changed and moved and is fluid. So if you think your friendships are static, you'd be missing the mark. This is all fluid. It's moving all the time. So allow yourself to be flexible and flow with what's happening around you. Because here's the truth. You are beautiful. You have an inherent desire and need and neurological and biological requirement to be connected to other people, even when you don't want to be sometimes, or even when it's hard. So sometimes we take those hard things or those things that feel tricky and we remember that we're not the only one doing that and that it's okay to fumble. It's okay to be awkward. It's okay to miss the mark. You are perfectly fine. You are intense and beautiful and amazing. And that's what matters. So until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, remember to keep your face to the sun so the shadows fall behind you because you are a rock star. You are here on purpose with a mighty purpose. So go out there and let your light shine. Develop your friendships and your connections. Pay attention to who you are investing in and who is investing in you. Pay attention to the economics of your own energy source and allow yourself to be your beautiful, most radiant self. Until the next episode of Someone Gets Me, this is Dianne saying, be well.